Hi there, my name is Dion Kay and I'm an Associate Professor of Mass Communications here at UWG. I'm the head of the Film and Video Production degree in the Department of Mass Communications, and I'm also an editor and a documentary filmmaker. So I have a few different access points to this film, but the one that strikes me most firmly is as someone who grew up in the shadow of the Rivonia trial without actually knowing it. And if you don't know anything about it yet, you're about to as you watch this week's film, The State Against Mandela and Others, as this film is centered around the Rivonia trial, which ultimately sent Nelson Mandela to prison for 27 years. I grew up in South Africa in the 1980s, and such was the level of government censorship that we only had 3 channels run by the South African Broadcast Commission, SABC. It was SABC 1, 2, and 3, all owned, operated, and serving as mouthpieces for the government. These stations also didn't start operating until the late 1970s, so in light of the censorship and the slow adoption of technology, we're so fortunate for the existence of all 256 hours of testimony from the Rivonia trial in 1964. These recordings provide us with a document of the trial, but a document is not a documentary. So in addition to exploring the subject matter of the trial, this film also explores the question, what does it mean to turn one into the other? A primary document into a documentary. And the answer depends on what you think a documentary is. There have been many working definitions over the years, starting as far back as the early 1900s with John Grierson, the so-called father of documentary filmmaking, who called it a creative treatment of actuality, all the way up to Gilles in this century, who simply calls them edifiers, things that teach us. This film is both a creative treatment of actuality and it is educational and illuminating, even though it asks questions as it answers others. One important question that this film asks us is, how do we render a world that we don't have access to? And the way this film approaches it is through traditional interview style that we see in documentaries, which is a cornerstone of documentary filmmaking, but certainly not the only one. Film is, after all, a visual medium, and there is very little that is visually interesting about interviews. The second strategy is through archival footage, meticulously researched and licensed, then compiled to give us a very tactile impression of the era in which the trial took place. And then there's the more creative approach, which is through animation. Animation is not new to documentary, and in The State Against Mandela and Others, the animation style has 2 effects. The first is a reference to, but not a copy of, the charcoal animations of William Kentridge, Kentridge, perhaps the most internationally esteemed artist to come out of South Africa, and whose father, Sir Sidney Kentridge, actually defended Nelson Mandela in the treason trials of 1958 to 1961, which was 3 years before the Rivonia trial, which is this film, what this film is centered around. The other power in the animation, though, is through its ability to distort reality, to sacrifice what we call in filmmaking spatio-temporal continuity, which is the linear and logical progress of space and time, in favor of a world that is more interpretive, creative, and emotionally real, with the grounding being provided by the interviews and the court audio. And with this grounding, it frees up the visuals to explore the emotional world, to give us something that is creative and emotionally impactful, right? A creative interpretation of actuality. I hope this has sparked some curiosity, and I'd love to chat some more about this once you have seen the film. I hope you enjoy it.